Who is God? Let's dive in this week and take a look. Hey everyone, Michael Williams here from Zoe Life Consulting Group. I hope you're all having a great day on purpose. This week, we're diving into a big subject. Who is God? And it's a big subject because he's a big God. Again, we're obviously not going to be able to get into everything, but I do want to focus again on some key points that I hope will help us all to gain some understanding and perspective. Today, for some context and history, we're going back to about 4,000 years ago to a land called Canaan. This is in the Middle East, around the area of modern-day Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, and parts of Jordan and Syria. There was a man there named Abram who God chose to reveal himself to, and later God changed his name to Abraham. Now, Abram was married to Sarai, and God later changed her name to Sarah. But God had promised to give this land to Abram's descendants. But Abram and Sarai had no children. They both wanted children, and they thought, how could this land be passed on to their descendants if they had no children? So Sarai had an idea. She told Abram to sleep with her slave, who was named Hagar, so that she could build a family through Hagar. And Abram agreed with this and slept with Hagar, and Hagar became pregnant. But then, after she was pregnant, Hagar started to despise Sarai. And Sarai put all the blame of this on Abram. Abram told Sarai to do whatever she thought was best. So Sarai began to mistreat Hagar, and Hagar ran away from her. You know, this reads like a modern day soap opera. If people think the Bible is just a bunch of stories about pious and righteous people looking down on everyone else, think again. It's full of stories like this, which are, could be very relatable to us thousands of years later. So Genesis 16, 7 through 10 says, "The angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert, and it was the spring that is beside the road to Shur. And he said, 'Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from, and where are you going?' 'I'm running away from my mistress Sarai,' she answered. Then the angel of the Lord told her, 'Go back to your mistress and submit to her.' The angel added, 'I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count.'" So let's look back on this. Hagar, pregnant, ran away into the desert because she was being mistreated. And verse 7 says the angel of the Lord found her there. How do you find her? We'll get into that in just a second. But the angel of the Lord then told her to go back to Sarai. Now, how badly was she being mistreated to run away into the desert while she was pregnant? But Hagar did what she was told, and she did return to Sarai. And she had a revelation about what had happened to her. Let's go back to the Bible. Genesis 16:13 says, "She gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. 'You are the God who sees me.' For she said, 'I have now seen the one who sees me.'" So, my friends, God sees us. He knows everything that we're going through. And the story of Hagar doesn't end there, though. She continues to be in conflict. There continues to be conflict between her and Sarai, and she later leaves again, this time with her son Ishmael. God again finds them in the desert, out of water and out of hope. God sees Hagar again and comes to rescue and leads her to water. And we won't go into this today, but you can read all about that in Genesis chapter 21. But for now, let's jump back to now around 3,000 years ago. So about 1,000 years have passed. Abraham's descendants are now living in the land that God had promised them. A man named David is the king of Israel and is ruling in Jerusalem. And David was a warrior, but he was also a musician and a poet. And the Bible describes David as a man after God's own heart. Now, David wrote much of what is the book of Psalms in the Bible. And the Psalms are a beautiful collection of songs and poems, very heartfelt, many of which are just filled with heartfelt cries out to God. But for today, let's look at what David says about God in Psalm 23. Psalm 23, "The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right path for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." So, God leads us and guides us if we let him. He protects us in dark times. He provides for us even in these dark times. God is good and he loves us. So now let's stay in the area of Jerusalem, but jump forward about 2,600 years, to about 2,600 years ago. Jeremiah was a man there. Jeremiah was a prophet. God chose individuals as prophets, usually to have the prophet tell the people a message that they had received from God. Now, Jeremiah was a prophet under several kings of Judah. And God had promised King David that if he and his descendants would remain faithful to God, they would continue to reign over Israel and prosper. But after King David, Israel was split into two kingdoms. One kingdom was Judah, and the other larger kingdom remained Israel. And the story behind the split: the kings that followed David, starting with his own son Solomon, they weren't fully devoted to God like David was. So God took the kingdom from them because of their disobedience. Their disobedience continued for the most part, so God eventually let both kingdoms be taken over by rulers from other kingdoms. Now, Jeremiah, as well as other prophets, were sent by God to warn people about the consequences for their disobedience and to give them a chance to change. Jeremiah warned the people and the kings of Judah that they would be defeated and taken into exile if they didn't start obeying God. And they didn't, and they were defeated, and they were taken into exile. But for today, let's look at the first thing that God told Jeremiah. Jeremiah 1:4-5 says, "The word of the Lord came to me, saying, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations." Yes, Jeremiah was chosen by God as a prophet, but first God tells him, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. In the last video, we saw that God is our creator, and this is affirmed here when God tells Jeremiah that it was him who formed Jeremiah in the womb. But God first tells Jeremiah that he knew him. So God knows us. Let's recap what we reviewed about God. God sees us. God leads us and guides us. God protects us and provides for us. And God knows us. My friends, take some time today to reflect on how God sees us, how he knows us, how he leads us, and how he guides us, how he provides for us. Thank him for all he does for us, and reflect on what happens when we disobey God. Thank him for his mercy and grace. Jeremiah called God to be a prophet. What has God called you to do? Hope you've enjoyed this and maybe thought about God from a different perspective. If you did enjoy this, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment down below, and share it with someone today. Peace and blessings, and we'll see you next time.